I presented myself, but I'll quickly tell you my name again. I am Vishnu Vardhani Rajan, and Arlene Tucker is here. Arlene, would you like to present yourself?
Hi, I'm in Yotza, and really nice that I could be with you all remotely. I wish I could be on the island with you. I'm a visual artist and an educator, and I'm excited to present CCC with Vishnu today for you all. Thank you.
Yeah, I was also sharing that I have never made slides, so Arlene has handheld me into this, and I'm actually, this is a big step for me. um, Yay! I'll keep the microphone on for you. Just follow with me.
Thank you.
Yes, so Convivial Complaint Cell, and it's a process of thinking through complaint making as diversity work that Zara Ahmed has conceived. So what we actually do is offer guidelines, perspectives, and mainly accountability practices for the community building processes. And we use feminist interventions. And as I was reading through this text, in this bubble, to say feminist interventions feels like a redundant thing, but I realized in my everyday life it needs to be said. Therefore, we put it there. And practices moved by equity at the center of the support structure of all processes. And CCC is a framework based on Zara Ahmed's work on complaint making as diversity work. So our aim at CCC is to stay objective, and we are still learning this. We are not service providers. That means that we are not psychotherapists or legal entities or lawyers. Yet
Or mediators.
Yes, or we are not mediators. And we hold space for people to digest as well as offer, as well as we offer communication techniques. We can go a bit more into what these communication techniques are. And we come from the perspective of really promoting accountability, accessibility, and receiving and delivering empathetically. And our largest, please say.
I just wanted to add, going along with what Vishnu was saying before, you know, it's also an awareness and giving space to articulate what becomes aware. So not to assume anything. And yeah, gain clarity through that discussion.
I'm actually just reading my text.
Yeah.
So our largest and most heartfelt intention is to move towards an equitable society where all voices are heard, and especially the ones that are otherwise not heard are heard. And the intention is to interpret how one understands the trajectory of community building and collaborations in the larger discourse of diversity work. So it's not two friends coming together, but it's two people when they come together. It's like this large package that they hold. So what does it actually mean when two people coming together into a collaboration? And so our research right now deploys and questions mainly the presence and absence of people who are actually included in spaces and excluded in spaces, and then agreements on like what is said and what is done. So we are basically going into that. Why complain? Sarah Ahmed explains how complaints are oftentimes made behind closed doors, and it's something that I have experienced personally myself. On like when I have something happening, I'm just going into the toilet and like dragging my friend there and like, oh, that's what's so shit. And then if you actually take this complaint to a formal table, doors are shut on those who complain. So basically the first and foremost reason is to actually open those doors that are shut on the people, and maybe to vent. And basically to start to gather facts, and then I have more notes, to focus on the problem and not the person. And this actually has been working quite well in terms of like really addressing what the issue is and not talking about the person being like, oh, you're such a jerk, but just saying this what has been done doesn't work for me. And then to constantly make observations. So even though we are talking about complaint making, but observations as another way to look at complaint or complaining, and then to uncover what is still missing in the foundational structures, what needs to be done still, the work that still needs to go through, and then to make complaints within institutions is to learn how they work and for whom they work. Like what is this space for whom, and how does it work? So again, going back to like this space of observations. And complaint as a nuance of quotidian concepts of self-care, community care, and community building. And then complaint as a practice for seeking connection, which is one of the foremost philosophies of feminist pedagogies on like how do you connect with someone who is in the space.
Also, I think complaining here, we can say that it can open up to being a suggestion or feedback, or really in a way just speaking your mind. So complaining doesn't have to be in the like traditional sense from a negative, have a negative connotation, but it could also be you know, a positive observation.
Yes, yeah, thank you for saying that. So we mainly have been thinking about also coming from Adrienne Marie Brown's pleasure activism. So complaining, that sounds like, which is a traumatized thing of like nagging. But how does a positive action plan look like when you actually take it up as like the deliciousness of making a complaint?
Which is why we should complain some more.
Yes. I go to the next slide, Arlene.
Okay.
So observations, we have started to work together with Arlene since this January, and we have processed 2 complaints together, and so some observations that we have to share with you. My grammar. We have some observations that we would like to share with you.
And also, I'll just expand that those 2 complaints involved roughly over 15 people, because it takes a village here as well to gain clarity on the complaint and to really open it up. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not one complaint per person, because when they get full. Yeah, go ahead, Vishnu.
Thank you. So we started to think through what story or version of reality is getting most attention and confirmation. And so a complaint is mainly coming because there is some kind of a conflict which is not clearly identified, and who is doing the complaining. In this case, okay, and feedback from somebody who has made a complaint. So what is true in a situation, it's multidimensional. Some people, yeah, I don't know how to say this in a way that's polite to white people. But often there is like this narrative of someone who is brown or from global south or a person of color that gets like tokens of what is already been traumatized, like some, yeah. And then especially if people's perspectives and interpretations are vastly different, either because of their socio-political, gender, or sexuality backgrounds, like there is a huge lacuna there on like what is the complaint there. And when we take into account or when we took into account feminist and anti-racist praxis, we realized that we could avoid the conflict or the bias that was there. For example, yeah, I already said this, that behaviors of the people from the global south is read in a way that is seen as a conflicting presence. And what we have observed in the conflict, do you want to share something else in this, Arlene?
In a second, but finish your thought, Vishnu.
Okay. So the conflict, what have you observed? Conflicts mainly arise when people with different privileges come together. And if people don't pay attention to their own privileges, then there is a conflict. So there is a constant like check your privileges written in safer space guidelines, but like how do we actually bring attention to our own privileges? And yeah,
I think that what we've also noticed in doing this work is that once a complaint is opened up, and then we've been speaking with people, they might not have even realized that they should have complained. Like they got a feeling. So what we've noticed is how complaining also empowers people. And that's been really, and so with that, it's, Vishnu and I were thinking of like how to make that more accessible. So how to make one feel comfortable to complain, and how to do that. I don't want to say efficiently, but how to do it in a way that somebody will listen.
Yeah. And that actually, that was the reason why who was doing the complaining was an essential question for us. Unlike the people that had to actually complain didn't even know that they could complain about that particular matter, but the people that were complaining were already people with the largest privileges. So like a white Finnish male in both cases. Yeah, and then conflicts have been arising when there is no clarity in agreements and roles. This was like when there is no clarity in role. Um, uh, as we are both currently also reading Decolonial Nonviolent Communication, and through this we have come to understand that need for contribution is one of the biggest needs. So when there is no clear role defined, the need for contribution is not met equally for the people in the group, and there is a conflict, and there. So that's another observation. Yeah. And the complaint with an intention to venge or to not seek for clarity or connection don't aid in community building. That seems like some kind of a meme, but I just needed to like say it again now. And another thing that we noticed through our work, that there are formal structures and there are informal structures, and this is something that Joe Freeman has been writing on, like the tyranny of structurelessness, that you constantly come into a space and you recognize, oh, there is actually a structure, but this structure I can't decipher. So it has been quite essential for everyone to have the opportunity to be involved in a given group and to participate in activities that define the structure, and those structures need to be explicit, not implicit, and the rules of decision making must be open and available to everyone. And yeah, I don't know how yet. But some things that we've been thinking about, which is like thinking through what is checking in. It's something that we are all in a way like aware of, like when a group comes in, just checking in, but like there are immediate check-ins, and then there could be larger check-ins where like you hold just how are we doing on the structure, like where are we, how is our space, and these kind of like larger check-ins. And it's something that I've been also thinking in like filmmaking. Often there is like a lot of pre-discourse that happens, like everyone is psychoanalyzing everything, and then when it's shooting days it's like pow, 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 pow. And for that kind of thing to happen, you really need to like go into the check-ins.
Yeah, and I think what's been helpful is to be really clear about what one's intentions are, in order to keep those expectations in check as well. So this takes a lot of dialogue and time, but that's what's needed to create a safer space where one feels that they can be accountable, and wants to be accountable for their behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see, but there are nods.
Oh, okay.
So in this thing about checking in, there is also like the processes around decision making, like how do you make a decision, and do you hold space for objections in your group, or is it like basically majority vote, or is it minority vote, or is it consensual, or is it consent based decision making? Like how is your decision making process when you are within a group?
What we have been doing so far, just because you brought up the group part, what we've been doing so far is Vishnu and I will speak with one person at a time, just to make sure that to be as clear as possible, and then we'll move from there. But we haven't yet dealt with larger groups. We can go to the next slide.
Okay. So what kind of complaints are we trying to focus on? Then we were sharing about our work. Someone was saying that, oh, in Finland there's a radio program on complaining, and it's been very popular for the last 20 years. And so I listened in to this radio program. So we are not taking up those kind of complaints, unlike how bad the weather is, or yeah. So those are also welcome as a way to bond just one-on-one. But those are not the things that we are working on. So complaints that are comments, as we said earlier, like some things that are observations that require some kind of positive action plan, and something that is basically working towards community building and for the community needs. And then complaints that bring connection, and yeah, I'm all the time saying like focus on the community building, because I mean, to me, I realized like it's such a big need. I somehow feel most alive in groups, and people are my school, and to me somehow connecting in a group or within a community is a big need, and it's very similar to Arlene as well, and we are part of the same association, and that's basically how this work started or picked up momentum.
Yeah.
And complaints as proposed by Sarah Ahmad that examine what we can learn about power from those who complain about abuse of power, drawing on oral and written testimonies. While Sarah Ahmad's lecture, Complaint as Diversity Work, she's still focusing on like mainly academic structures and how students are processing the complaints, and then we are trying to apply this in other spaces than just academic spaces, so like art and cultural collectives and groups and associations.
I think complaints can also be questions. You know, that you're uncertain about something, just you can ask. So it's also a space to ask and to gain clarity, and probably, you know, from asking, a well of other information and complaints or questions can arise. Thanks, Vishnu.
So when complaining, it's an invitation to not assume that we have all the facts, make observations and not accusations, focus on the problem and not the person, ask more questions, seek support, and the last one, it's mainly for myself, because I often like withdraw, like when the other person starts to be very convincing, I'm like, I'm wrong. So that's basically where me and Arlene come in also, and this is the kind of support that I myself need to like stand my ground. So it's a little mantra that I often tell myself.
Yeah, and chances are, if you're feeling this or feeling something, somebody else is feeling it too. So I'm so grateful that Vishnu wanted to write, don't be afraid to stand your ground, because it's like, well, yeah, that's a really good reminder for myself to do that too, because so within this practice, it's also building a support system.
Yes. And our inspirations for this research work is Sarah Ahmad. If we haven't enough adored her name here yet, who is a British Australian scholar and nonviolent communication. Even though we started off with the communication based on principles by Marshall Rosenberg, right now we are with Meenakshi, who is from Sri Lanka, and she has made decolonial nonviolent communication. Yes, and then we are also applying co-counseling techniques, which is a grassroots methods of personal exchange based on reciprocal peer-to-peer counseling. And then we are also working with sociocracy, which is social tools, basically thinking through artful participations and decision-making processes, and thinking of structures and who decides who decides. Yeah. Ta-da.
So if you would like to complain now, I mean, not now, but you can email us. I mean, if you want to say something, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you.